Welcome, friends. It's nighttime here, and it's pretty late. I've had a long day because my kids have been sick, and I'm sure you know what that can be like. Even though I'm a nurse, I still spend a lot of time working up all those home remedies that come from my grandma whenever anyone in the family gets sick. So I spend a lot of time slathering on Vicks Vapor Rub, doing Epsom salt baths, and putting onions in my kids' socks for them to sleep with overnight. Let me know if I'm the only one whose grandma used to use that trick on them. I truly believe it helps. Okay, well, thanks for being here. Tonight, I have a little something to share with you. So before I could head off to bed, I usually take a bath on my own with some Epsom salt, and I listen to a podcast while I do that. And tonight I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, the SoJo Files. I have some other videos on my channel about SoJo Files. I really love the woman who runs that show, and you should check her out. I was really surprised to find that the SoJo Files has a podcast out right now where she interviews Jim and Bobye Holt. I'm going to link the SoJo Files podcast below. I believe it's just part 1, and I think there's going to be a second part with Jim and Bobye. I was completely shocked. I had no idea that they were going to give an interview. SoJo Files is based in Arkansas, and she attended Josh Duggars' original trial as well as the sentencing. And she's also spoken to some other sources that are friends or close to the Duggars. And I just find all of her information to be honest, and frequently it's pretty riveting. So I highly recommend checking out that podcast below. So after I listened to the podcast, I had some conflicting feelings about the Holts. I think I always will. I'm forever grateful to Bobye Holt that she came forward and she testified at Josh's trial. I think she did an excellent job there. I'm also grateful that she continues to kind of demonstrate what perhaps the best of the IBLP had to offer, as far as, she's really tried to do the best that she could to protect her own children in many ways and still be loving and forgiving towards the Duggars up until a point. So I think in certain ways she does exemplify being a good person when it comes to living within the Christian fundamentalist doctrine she was living under and may still be living under to this day. I know that they have, Jim and Bobye Holt, they've distanced themselves from the Duggars and also from the IBLP, but they definitely still espouse Christian ideologies. It's interesting because also from what I gather, Jim and Bobye are close with another witness from Josh Duggars' trial. Clint was the computer tech friend of Josh Duggar who testified at trial, talking about how Josh knew quite a bit about computers when they were growing up. Clint worked on Jim Holt's campaigns with him and became friends with Josh due to their families both being within that church group. Clint has done several interviews with SoJo Files, and it seems almost as though he likely helped connect the SoJo Files with the Holts to make this interview happen. And once again, Clint is someone who I really respect. He grew up alongside the Duggar children within that church, and since then he has chosen to leave and lead a different lifestyle. I've also noticed that Clint is very present on the Reddit page for Duggar Snark. He posts a lot of information there, and he's done, I think, at least one Ask Me Anything for Reddit users. And I just find his information to be clearly his best attempt as being as honest as possible with all of us and trying to work on his own issues surrounding what happened with the Duggars. So please check out the SoJo Files podcast. I'm not going to go over everything that Jim and Bobby had to say in part 1 of their interview with SoJo Files, but I do want to talk about and go over the response to this Jim and Bobby Holt interview on Reddit. I find it so interesting reading through the stream and seeing what everyone has to say about the Duggars. So let's jump into it now. About 24 hours ago, Duggar Snark received its first post about the SoJo Files, and it says, SoJo Files interview, Jim and Bobby Holt. Poster writes, has anyone listened to this? It's really interesting, talking about how the Duggars handled Josh. Apparently from the beginning, they were warning JB, and they were very unhappy with how JB lied about their role and everything. Jim Holt said, Jim Bob, he's not struggling. He failed. This next comment is regarding when Josh returned from the treatment center his parents sent him to after the initial incident where he was caught SMing his sisters. Bobby said, all of the people in the church were telling him this is not long enough for Josh to be in counseling. I mean, nobody from the church went down to see them because they were still so shocked. Commenter. The Holts talk a lot about how they felt that Josh should have gone through the court system, that they believe God is a God of justice, and that he would see to it what needed to happen would happen. Sounds like they were all disturbed by Jim Bob trying to cover things up, and this may have resulted in Jim Bob keeping things from them as well, since they claim that they thought he was sent to proper authorities and not just some off-duty cop. Next commenter chimes in with lots of concerns about the role that Bobby and Jim Holt played. You know what? You can bet money on it that if I knew a friend's son was SMing his sisters, I'd report it to police. The entire community around those kids failed them. Commenter replies, agreed. I think they had complicated feelings about it because Jim Bob hadn't shown his true colors yet, and they were shocked by the lengths he was taking to cover things up. But under no circumstances should anyone's personal relationship with an offender prevent them from reporting CA. Next commenter. Bingo. They failed too. They failed spectacularly. You make the darn phone call. If the powers that be do nothing, that is on them. But you don't play God and not report, hoping the family does the right thing. Commenter. The way the Holts say is that there was a lot revealed to them that hasn't been disclosed to the public. It makes me wonder what made everyone take it more seriously. There are more skeletons there that might be way worse than what is already known. Next commenter. It seems quite likely that the A was ongoing over several years rather than isolated incidents, and who knows what else remains covered up. It seems like everything that has become public has come from outside the Duggars household. Who knows what JB and M aren't telling. Original commenter. The Holts confirm as much. They say that the Duggars found out about the SM for the first time when Josh was 13 and that it had started when he was 12. Keep in mind, at that age, his oldest known target, Jill, would have been 9. It continued until he was 15, at which point the matter was addressed by him going away to dig a pond. Original commenter. Also, apparently, even after the Holts and the Duggars had a falling out, the kids were very close to the Duggar kids. The kids were very close, so the Duggar kids would invite the Holts to family events, and then the parents would call and uninvite them. And if they ran into each other, the kids would ask why they didn't come. Just tell your children you don't want them to come. Don't make it seem like their friends have abandoned them. And then I found it interesting that Bowman Fedosky chimes in. We've spoken about the Fedoskys on this channel before. I think I have 2 separate videos dedicated to the Fedosky family, and they are long-term friends of the Duggar family. Bowman states, I can 100% verify this. There was a time that the Duggars stopped showing up to events, but the Holts almost always came. My parents often had homeschool events at their house and parties throughout the year. I actually was so disconnected from everything and everyone. I assumed they were still close friends, and the Duggars just didn't come around anymore. To my family's function specifically, I didn't see many Duggars, but I often saw and talked to the Holts. It wasn't until the trial that I realized Jim and Bobby had basically gone against them and weren't friends anymore. And then I talked with some of the Holt daughters, and that they hadn't been friends or in contact in years, and it was all because of the falling out, because the Holts stood up to them and said what was going on and how they were handling the situation wrong. I had always tried to keep quiet myself and not bring more shame to the Duggars, but after hearing that, I realized just how bad it had to have been, because if the Holts got to the point of no longer being associated with them, then that made me realize just how bad it had gotten, because they were as close as anyone ever could have been. And that was when I felt more okay about sharing stuff and doing the AMA, the Ask Me Anything, which he did on the Reddit group. I've always loved Jim and Bobby, but seeing them take the stand like they did definitely made them that much more badass in my mind, and I'm so glad that they did what is right. Original commenter states, there are so many things that bother me about the Duggars, but aside from just enabling Josh, this has to be one of the worst things. The family as a whole, and specifically several of their young children, have gone through this horrible trauma, and not only are they cutting them off from their best friends who could be such an invaluable emotional support, but they're doing it in such a way that the children don't even know it's being driven by their own parents. How much extra shame and suffering they must have felt, thinking that their friends wouldn't be there anymore because of what Josh had done to them. And this last commenter talks a little bit about mental health issues within the IBLP, just kind of making some comments. I know recently in the background I've been working on a video about mental health and Christian fundamentalism, and I can say for sure that there are many issues when people want to go out and receive counseling from therapists other than Christian counselors. The commenter said, it's not that Jim, Bob, and Michelle were blinded by their love of Josh. It's that they don't want a therapist for Josh because they're in a CULT, and a secular therapist may influence Josh and cause him to question his parents' belief. Court intervention is Jim Bob's worst nightmare because Josh will be surrounded by non-CULT members for the first time in his existence. Josh may start to question everything he's been taught. His entire belief system may come into question since he won't be under Jim Bob's umbrella of protection. All right, guys, there's so much to hear if you listen to the SoJo Files podcast, and you can also check out Duggars Snark on Reddit and look up the SoJo Files and go through this entire stream of other Reddit users speaking out about the interviews. I always find it really interesting to hear everybody's comments and get an idea of what everyone's thinking. I have to head off to bed now, but I hope you will take some time to head down your own rabbit hole.